760 WJR. Sitting in for Mitch, here's Guy Gordon.
We know that all of us have endured some bullying in our lives, and the pranksters that got malicious, and I'm sure, Kenny, you've endured that.
Endured a little as a youngster.
And we still do it to Ray. But the problem with social media now is that the malicious pranksters can do this remotely without any knowledge of what they may be doing, what the repercussions are, what the consequences are of their actions. And up in Marquette, a young man named Tyson Benz had a cell phone. He wasn't supposed to have one, somehow purchased it on his own, and he found out that from the device, through text messages and through social media, that his girlfriend had committed suicide. The problem was, it was ultimate hashtag fake news. It hadn't happened. She was fine. He didn't know that, though, and he hung himself. 11 years old, from Marquette. His name's Tyson Benz. Now a 13-year-old girl is facing criminal charges for maliciously giving him false information that led him to become distraught and kill himself within 2 hours of receiving those messages. Dr. Taaka Cash is a psychiatric professional, mental health professional who specializes in child and adolescent issues and joins us live. Dr. Cash, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me.
Have you heard of other instances like this that are, I mean, this literally, it sounds like Romeo and Juliet. It is Shakespearean in its tragedy, and have you heard of other things like this happening with social media and texting?
Right. Although unfortunate, this is something that we're seeing in higher incidences in our office down here in this area. And so this is something that's not new. This is something that is garnering attention right now. And so what we're seeing, I'm seeing kids as young as like last week, like a 6-year-old that's coming in that wanted to harm herself and wanted to hang herself as well. A young boy a few weeks ago, his dad was putting him to sleep. And he was like, Dad, I've been thinking about this for a really, really long time, and I want to hang myself. There's this new little hashtag that's going around, in schools that says that if you don't do well, go hang yourself. Whether it's academics, peer pressure, home environment, fitting in, kids are utilizing hanging themselves as a form of coping with things that we would normally be able to cope with, in the past.
So what do we do as parents to confront this? First of all, we've got to teach them that everything that they see online, read online, and that is texted to them is not true, and not to react to it and to come to us. But we know that they often don't come to mom and dad.
Correct. And I don't know if you're familiar with the show 13 Reasons Why. 13 Reasons Why is based on, it's a Netflix documentary and also a book, and it's based on these very things that are happening. And it's based on a girl who committed suicide and a young boy who committed suicide, and they were teens and they were in school. And so it actually places the parents inside of the mind of an adolescent who is going through the peer pressures and what they go through from the time that they wake up in the morning, eating breakfast with their family, to the time that they're going to school, to the time that they're getting home. So now what it's doing is educating parents on the right questions to ask their children when they get home. How can I be present for you? How are you feeling uncomfortable? What made you feel uncomfortable about that situation? Is there something that you're trying to communicate to me? Your isolation is hurting me. It's making me feel sad. I don't know how to help you. Help me to help you. We have to be able to educate not only ourselves, but what our children's depression looks like in our homes.
Well, what has changed since we were kids? I was just thinking at 11 years old that I would not have had a concept of, suicide or something that, earth-shattering. Do you think kids are desensitized to violence and emotion now? And if that's the case, what's it stem from? Because like I said, we were all kids at that time too.
Well, what it is it's not that they're desensitized to emotion. They're emotionally reactive, and they're acting out of emotion. We as kids back in our generation, we were thought-driven kids. And some kids may have had behavioral issues, but not emotional. We didn't have a lot of emotionally driven kids. These kids have an overactive amygdala. They have an overestimation of emotions. They're acting out on their emotions. They're not being able to to cope actually with the weight of how they feel. And we have to understand that these kids, their brains, they don't stop developing until they're 25 years of age. So we have to think about the pressures that they have access to. And that's the biggest thing that's different between our generation and this generation, is that they have increased access to technology and other means to carry it out.
So how much do we monitor what goes on in our child's social universe? Because, as you said, we can try to probe, but we know we get pushback. So do we have to do some of this surreptitiously?
Well, it's not that you have to do it surreptitiously. What you do is you do negotiations with your child. You say, you know what? I want to be truthful with you. I want you to be truthful with me. Let's negotiate some things. In order for you to have X, Y, and Z, this is what you have to do for me. In order for me to ensure that you're safe, this is what's going to have to happen. So how can you and I come to a common ground? Because I'm an adolescent parent as well, and so my whole goal is to survive adolescence. So I've gotten pretty crafty and creative at articulating with my child, negotiating things that, you know, hey, if it's not her phone that brings her gratification, it may be playing in the band or playing softball she's driven to. So if I take that from her, she's going to take a harder hit as opposed to her, you know, having her access to her cell phone. So we just negotiate certain things. And once we've negotiated something, I hold her accountable to that. And that's when that accountability and responsibility comes into play. And that's when you have to educate your children on, hey, thank you. Thank you so much for being trustworthy. Thank you so much for following through on what you signed up to do. And that's what we have to show our kids, that not only are you accountable, not only are you responsible, but you're emotionally holding yourself responsible and behaviorally holding yourself responsible as well.
Dr. Taaka Cash, we have to take a short break, but I hope you'll stay with us for just a moment. We have some more questions, but first we got to do some weather and traffic on the 5, so stand by for that. Much more ahead on the cruel consequences of social media. Hard to believe that a 5 or 6 year old actually will consider suicide as an option, but that's the message we're learning. Back with more.